Take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So I caught a little bit of Jordan Peterson's recent appearance on Piers Morgan. He went on Piers Morgan Uncensored and talked about, I don't know, a lot of different things, tariffs, and culture in general, which is what he always talks about. I didn't listen to most of the stuff about tariffs or anything, because I think that gets to one of my main problems with Jordan Peterson is that he way overextends his expertise. But he was also talking later about, his usual kind of subject matter, talking about young men in the West who are so lost and wasted on this, horrible feminist society that has warped the generation and blah, blah, blah. And he gets into all of his stuff about what he thinks constitutes a meaningful life, and how he thinks that he has contributed to that for people, etc., blah, blah, blah. But really, Piers Morgan kind of leads him right into that. He kind of gives him the biggest softball question in the world, a literal softball, where he says, I notice that you get emotional often when we talk about this issue of young men. And sometimes you shed tears about it, and I wonder, what is it about it that you think makes you so emotional? And I think, Pierce was literally trying to goad a moment out of him there, because he then uses the images of Jordan Peterson crying in the thumbnail. So it worked for me because, I don't, Jordan Peterson doesn't pop up on my timeline much anymore at this point. There was a while where I was listening to some of what he had to say many years ago, and then that quickly sort of, again, it's like listening to his ideas about psychology and how people can improve their lives. He has some things to say there, but once it extends further than that into politics, not only do I feel that he's not qualified, so to speak, to talk about that, because I'm not qualified to talk about it either, I'm just a guy, but I think that he speaks with an air of qualification about things like climate change and the general political landscape and political motives and the dynamic between the political parties. This is a guy who's not even from America. I think recently he moved to America from Canada. So it's like, I just don't understand his obsession with talking about things not only that he's not an expert in, but things that he can't talk about without breaking down into this weird psychosexual, hyper-symbolic, metaphysical type of terminology. And in a sense, part of me relates to what he's trying to do there, because he's trying to get down to the real bare bones of what the culture war dynamic is, what it is that the different ideas that push and pull at society actually mean, and that sort of thing. In some sense, I think that's a noble pursuit, but he gets caught up in all of this religious jargon and nonsense that's not actually attached to any kind of like real adherence to religion. And so I think that's where his value stops, frankly. I think that if you're somebody who's looking for some guidance for how to get your life together a little bit, the advice that Jordan Peterson has on the front end can be useful for that. But even in that book, I remember cracking that book open, 12 Rules for Life, the original one. I haven't read the recent ones he's put out. But that original book, 12 Rules for Life, I was expecting it to be like well written and articulate and like really thoughtful and something that seems to have staying power. And that was not what I found in that book at all. That book is not very well written. It's very cartoonish. And right away, it takes on this characterization of things like the noble lobster to try to use that as a comparison for how people should live their life. And it's just absolutely cartoonish, and he makes all kinds of weird misogynistic points in there, and none of it is very well dressed. And So that's just kind of like where my opinion stands of Jordan Peterson, other than paying attention to his various breakdowns in public since then, whether they be emotional breakdowns where he starts crying, or these like weird vindictive breakdowns against people like Elliot Page, where he decides to go after this person for no reason, which ultimately led to him losing his credentials as a psychologist, because his behavior on social media was not only like unbecoming, like something that anybody who represents any institution shouldn't be doing, but it was also just oddly vindictive and bullying and badgering somebody who did not ask for your help or did not ask for your opinion. And you're loudly opining not just about something that this person said or did, but like the very core of who they are, something that they've worked out with their doctor that is the best way for Elliot to live his life like with happiness and with joy. And then Jordan Peterson wants to chime in and say that he was being butchered by Nazi doctors and all this shit. He's an insane person. And I think over the years, the veil of sanity has dropped pretty quick from his work, because, you know, it just doesn't take him long before he gets into the sort of psychobabble. And I say that as a person who I think that sometimes there's value to psychobabble. Like, I'm down with fucking metaphysical, fried shit, talking about, the universe and how our sort of consciousnesses are organized together and that type of thing. Like, that shit's interesting to me. But, and I think because that stuff is interesting, Jordan Peterson is able to grab a lot of ears. But I don't know, man. It's like when you can't answer basic questions about like whether or not you believe in God, despite the fact that you regularly profess that belief in God is a moral imperative of some kind, it just gets to a point where it's like, what are you even talking about? So let me give an example of what he was even talking about in this Piers Morgan appearance, and then I want to go through it. I get that a lot of people who are in my regular audience don't care about Jordan Peterson, or don't need to be convinced about him one way or the other. But last time I talked about him, I reached a lot of people who are fans of Jordan Peterson and were mad at me that, this was before I started reaching a more progressive audience. So by talking about Jordan Peterson, I instantly reached a lot of his fans. And so, if people like that are stumbling across this video, I say this as somebody that has, a decent amount of context with Jordan Peterson. I've paid a lot of attention to him over the years, so I'm not speaking from a place of like surface level ignorance or whatever. So let me play this clip and then I'll tell you what I have to say about it, so stick around.
Jordan, I'm always struck by how emotional you get when you talk specifically, and this has happened a few times when I've talked to you, when your mind takes you specifically to young men who've come and told you what they've been going through. And it's almost like you've become a surrogate dad to just, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of young men who, for whatever reason, have been lost and feel abandoned and feel confused and don't have anyone to try and steer them to, some better place. Why does it affect you so emotionally, though?
Well, Piers, before my public presence emerged, let's say, or developed, I worked as a clinical psychologist, and that was pretty intense. I spent about 13 hours a week, maybe more than that, listening to people at a very deep level. I really liked that. It was unbelievably interesting. It was like one Dostoevskian novel after another, hour by hour, and I really learned to listen. And people are so fascinating if you listen to them and they actually start to tell you what they think. They're unbearably interesting. It's just partly why people keep the conversations at a shallow, and polite level. And it's not surprising. But I like to go deeper than that. And that was kind of bounded when I was doing my clinical practice. It was a set number of hours a week. And I had many other things to occupy myself with. But then when the work I was doing started to explode, I was in contact with thousands of people, not individuals, and they talked to me, and I could see this demoralization, and it's part of fatherlessness, broadly speaking, and sometimes specifically. And I could see the pathway to rectifying that. Like, the pathway to rectifying that, as far as I've been able to understand, and I've understood this more deeply as the years have gone by, is that we're built for adventure, Pierce, and you take on adventure by taking on maximal responsibility, and that's the symbol of hoisting your cross voluntarily and trudging up the hill, right? And that's the symbol upon which our society is founded. And the adventure of life justifies its suffering, and it's maximized with maximal responsibility. And I understand that deeply at a religious level. I understand that that's the symbolic world on which our productive and peaceful culture was properly founded. And I've seen the effect of communicating that to people, thousands of people. And it's a great privilege to serve that role, but it's also overwhelming. I think it is one of the things that made me, I was ill for quite a long time. And I think that was part of the reason, just seeing this, like this malaise, so deep. It's like, who do you admire? You admire some power mad hedonist? Well, that would be Andrew Tate. Or do you admire someone who's taken on some responsibility? Like, your natural proclivity in a healthy psyche is to admire the shepherd, let's say, and not the goddamn tyrant.
Yeah.
And not the hedonist who lives for the immediate pleasure, driven by his whims. It's hard for me to imagine to understand how we've forgotten these things. I guess that's part of the religious, what would you say, the degeneration of the religious substrate in the West. We've forgotten what our symbols mean. And the thing is, Pierce, they mean something.
So here we have Jordan Peterson. This is Peterson's consistent message over the years, which is that young men and people in general in our society are harmed by the fact that a religious substrate, in his words, that sort of undergirds society and shows people ways that they can live their life that are productive, that are not necessarily intuitive to the average person, and yet are imperative to organizing a healthy society. That is Jordan Peterson's contention, and that by losing the way of this sort of religiously inspired substrate of society, that people become miserable, people become unproductive, and slovenly, and suicidal or whatever. And so he blames that on the fact that he comes across a great many men who have lost their way and are unproductive human beings and don't know how to fix it. And so that's one thing that Jordan Peterson did, an aspect of his work that I think is valuable, is he identified that there's a lot of young men out there who are very lost and don't have any concept of how to get themselves together, or even what it means to be a man, or what it means to be a productive human being in society. And Jordan Peterson's contention is that stuff like feminism and postmodernism have convinced people that their role in society is arbitrary, and so therefore it gives them permission to opt out, and it invites cynicism and nihilism about the need for a person to do anything in life. And so Jordan Peterson's answer for that is to turn towards order, turn towards discipline and responsibility, or religion if necessary. So what I think is valuable about that is, again, purely on the psychological level, where he's saying, if you're miserable in life and you feel worthless and you feel like you're not doing anything right, the best thing that you could possibly do is take on responsibility. Take on responsibility in your family, with those around you. You know, if you're trying to get a girlfriend, if you're trying to find a partner of some kind, the best way to do it is by showing that you're capable of introducing somebody else to your life in that way and living as a productive human being. And that takes time. It takes time, and it takes discipline, and it takes every single day trying to do something that is going to improve your immediate surroundings or your immediate health or whatever. And that's essentially what being a productive person is valuing stability and responsibility. And so all of that is true. But did you notice how simply put that was, that I just said that? Like, I didn't have to use any weird metaphysical metaphors about Jesus or carrying the cross up the hill or taking the burden on the back or being in the belly of the whale of Pinocchio. And I'm not talking about symbols. And the other thing I'm not talking about is any type of religious framework that you have to try to stretch yourself to find value in order to recognize how that type of responsibility can work in your life and how it can help you. And that right there is the problem with Jordan Peterson's approach to helping people. And I'll give him the credit, although I don't think he deserves that much credit, but I'll give him the credit of saying that he doesn't explicitly tell people that you need to have God and Jesus in your life, and that's the only way to get yourself together. There are many people who that's what they tell people. Many of them are in Jordan Peterson's orbit, and Jordan Peterson is in many of their orbit, but that's not explicitly what he says. What he says is that religion is a fundamental piece of what shows all of us how to live productive lives. And so if we throw out religion as a concept, and if we do away with the idea that God is real or that there's any need to believe in God and adhere to his rules, then what we're going to be losing is the structure of our society that is moral and good. So obviously we can make arguments all day about how religion is not in and of itself moral and good, has led to many atrocities throughout history, and not all of the organizations and structures of society that were encouraged and explicitly built by religions like Christianity are good or helpful or healthy for anybody. And in fact, many of them we've done away with over the years because they're explicitly the opposite of helpful to building a real society. And so, I mean, that's the problem right there, is that, like, why do we have to attach our psychology, our pursuit of a better life, to archaic ideas that even this guy cannot explain in non-archaic terms? I think it would be more intellectually honest if he was just straightforwardly preaching out of the Bible. But instead what he's doing is he's trying to pick and choose symbols from the Bible and other places, and he's saying those symbols, even though I'm taking them out of context that was supposed to give them significance in the first place, those symbols are actually much more significant than symbols. And there is the contradiction, that if you're somebody who's really struggling to find meaning in life, then this could lead you down a religious pathway by way of convincing you that you have to find truth in these religious proclamations that isn't necessarily there, because finding that truth, seeking that truth in a religious context is the only way that you're going to be able to make sense of your life. And so I think that's a flawed worldview, and it's gotten Jordan Peterson very far in terms of building a career, and he's still around. You know, at this point, I think he's been pretty well marginalized to the point where, you know, some of these crazier rants that he went on, like the whole thing about Elliot Page, is really like nuts. Like, he really lost his mind over the idea that Elliot Page is a transgender man and, you know, is an actor that used to present as a woman and is now a man, was born as a woman and is now a man. That literally, that concept is so disgusting to Jordan Peterson. And he so much built his career off of the idea that somebody's ability to do that is an imposition on his own very freedom. That is so much at the core of Jordan Peterson's project, that the rest of this stuff about trying to rescue men from the rot of society or whatever, it falls flat for me, because he's not extending this type of empathy that he expresses about, frankly, young men and nobody else, to any other type of person. And he talks about it a little bit in his books. He talks about, how he would do sessions with women and that sort of thing, although, it would belie certain biases, we'll put it that way. But yeah, I think Jordan Peterson it looks firmly in the face of young men who are lost and who do feel demoralized by, I don't fucking know, feminism, whatever the fuck. And he's firmly placed his worldview there. And his lack of ability to look outside of that worldview, I think, stunts his ability to see that this type of perspective that he's coming up with, the same people that are attracted to him, many of them are the same people that are attracted to Andrew Tate. And I know that we could split hairs and say, well, actually, this audience doesn't really like Jordan Peterson because he said this, and Ben Shapiro's audience doesn't like Andrew Tate because, listen, I promise you, it's all the same. If you're in one of those guys' audience, it's all the same. It's a churn. It's a churn of people that go from, oh, this guy sounds more reasonable. Oh, he's getting a little weird. Okay, this guy's not quite radical enough. Oh, now I'm going to go a little bit further down the rabbit hole. Oh, maybe it went a little too far. Now I'm back up at the top. Now I'm back in the Daily Wire territory. This is how it all works. It's the reason that Ben Shapiro platforms Matt Walsh and formerly Candace Owens, is because part of the point of these platforms is to point you down a darker rabbit hole. And Jordan Peterson is a part of that same pipeline. And there are many, many people out there who have, taken a bite of what Jordan Peterson has to offer. And they said, you know what? This isn't really doing it. I need something that is more explicitly ethno-nationalist. And Jordan Peterson gestures in that direction, but I need somebody who's going to say it out loud. And so, I think ultimately that's the flaw in his ability to help anybody. And the last thing that he says there is that it's no wonder that people are gravitating towards Andrew Tate because of this demoralization that comes in our feministic society, supposedly, that demoralizes young men and forces them in an aggressive direction. And yet he's talking about the same types of men that are attracted to him. And also, Jordan Peterson, it should be noted that his own daughter dated Andrew Tate. So whatever it is that appeals to people in general, not just men but women, about Andrew Tate, a disgusting rapist who should be in jail right now and only isn't because Donald Trump's administration is friendly to him. But whatever it is that's attractive about that guy is attractive to somebody that Jordan Peterson himself raised, this guru of masculinity and of roles in society, gender roles in society. So, I don't think they were together very long, and frankly, I don't really care to get into all that. I don't know what the fuck happened between them. But I know that happened, and that's kind of weird, right? That's kind of weird. So, to me, what that says is that there's better role models out there than Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate, and that this brave quest for answers that both of these guys espouse some version of, to be quite honest, is actually just a distraction from the fact that, there is some real truth to what he said there, which is taking on responsibility in your community and with people around you, learning and listening to people around you, learning from the women in your life, learning from people who are different from you in your life, putting in effort to not just learn and be around those people, but to help them and to help them grow. That is the way that you can become a fully actualized, not just a man, but a human being.